I met Aaron 2 weeks after we moved into our new place in Ridgewood, a sleepy upstate New York town that felt stuck in the early 2000s. It was late August. Sunlight still held heat, but evenings had a clean edge that hinted at school starting. My mom had taken a teaching job at the high school, and after she and Dad split, we moved from Syracuse. I didn't know anyone. My older sister Tessa was off to college, so it was just me and Mom in a house that smelled like paint. He had a way of pulling details out of the air. A stray joke, a quiet observation that made the world feel a fraction smaller. I noticed nervous habits, picking at his nail when he lied about homework, the flinch when someone mentioned his mom working late, and the way he stared at the ceiling like he was trying to read the cracks. Those things made him human, and quietly dangerous sometimes. Aaron was the first person who didn't treat me like background noise. It was lunchtime on the 4th day of sophomore year when he slid into the empty seat across from me and asked, "New kid?" He didn't wait for an answer before adding, "You look miserable as hell." I laughed because what else do you do when someone names the mood you've been carrying? He had a half-claimed swagger, floppy brown hair, one side of his t-shirt untucked, a sarcastic grin that suggested he knew more than he let on. We started hanging out after school. The park, his house, the basement with the pool table and a TV the size of a diner. His dad worked as a contractor, so their place was nicer than mine. His mom worked long nursing shifts and was rarely around. Things moved quick. Texts became late-night Call of Duty sessions and a steady stream of memes. He made me feel less like an outsider. So when he asked if I wanted to come over for a sleepover on Friday, I didn't think twice. I remember the exact time. 6:42 p.m. His house looked like the picture in my head. 2 stories, a wraparound porch, a blue door. I carried my backpack, a charger, and a sleeping bag. Aaron opened the door with damp hair, hoodie, and basketball shorts, eyes already smiling. "Hey man, you're late. It's 6:42. "Yeah, and I said 6:30, I shot back. "You want the good snacks or not?" I rolled my eyes and stepped inside, hit by the smell of cinnamon candles and a faint dog smell that made no sense. His dad was out camping that weekend. We gamed until about 9, ordered a pizza with too many toppings, and watched half of some dumb movie. Eventually the Netflix noise faded and we started talking. It felt easy. Then Aaron changed the subject, flipping a small metal coin between his fingers. "You ever do that thing?" he asked, casual. "Where you try to freak yourself out on purpose?" I blinked. "What, like say Bloody Mary in a mirror, watch late-night videos, push until you chicken out?" He shrugged like it was a hobby. I laughed, nervous. "When I was 10, maybe," he smirked. "Lame. Still do?" "Fear reminds you you're alive," he leaned in. "Tell you what, let's make tonight interesting." A pulse of something equal parts thrill and dread ran through me. Scary story battle. You tell one, I tell one, vote. Loser sleeps on the floor. I hesitated. "What if we tie?" He snorted. "Then we both sleep on the floor and suffer like peasants." He grinned and I matched him. "You go first," I said. He shoved the courtesy back. "No way, guessed." So I started with a half-remembered Reddit sleep paralysis tale. Shadow at the foot of the bed, the usual. He nodded, barely hiding boredom. "That's it?" he asked. "All right, my turn," he said, and his voice dropped. The room tightened in that way rooms do when someone stops joking. He wasn't playing. "This one's true," he said, eyes on mine. 2 blocks from here. Kid named Dylan 2 years ago. Sophomore like us. Kinda quiet. I moved here mid-year and knew no one. Sound familiar? The knot in my stomach tightened. Aaron told me about the one friend he'd made. The kid who'd invited him over that first night to show him the ropes. He watched me while he talked, eyes flicking to my face. The first night, he'd said, they'd gamed, eaten junk, and tried to sit through a movie. Then someone suggested a game, scary stories. I swallowed. "Okay, what happens next?" I asked. Aaron leaned in until I could taste the mint on his breath. "The new kid never went home," he said. The temperature seemed to drop. For a moment I wanted to laugh, but my throat closed. "Right, and then they didn't bury him," Aaron said slowly. "He just vanished. Parents assumed he ran away. Cops looked at the friend, but they couldn't prove anything." The silence felt thick. Aaron sat back and the grin slid on, practiced. "So, who wins?" I exhaled without thinking. "That isn't a scary story." "That's just wrong," he laughed. "Exactly. Fear isn't all about ghosts. Sometimes the worst part is how well people hide." I should have gone home. Instead, we pretended for hours longer. More videos, my thumb scrolling my phone. He dozed first, snoring softly. I lay in my sleeping bag on the floor, staring at the ceiling, cold settling into my bones. Saturday morning, 8:03 a.m. I woke and Aaron was gone. I thought he'd stepped out, but 20 minutes passed. "Where'd you go?" I texted, no reply. I checked the bathroom, the backyard, the garage. His phone was on the kitchen counter, plugged in, screen dark. A wrong tightness climbed my chest. The basement door was cracked. I pushed it. The steps protested. The basement smelled heavier than I remembered. "Aaron?" I called. Only the fridge hummed and the fluorescent lights buzzed. I rounded the corner and stopped. A mattress was wedged against the far wall. Handcuffs were bolted to the floor. A battered camcorder on a tripod aimed at the mattress. A shoebox sat on a milk crate. My fingers trembled as I lifted the lid. School IDs, 4 of them, faces I half recognized, names that weren't Aaron. My chest dropped. He wasn't his name. I ran, stumbling up the stairs and out the front door, and didn't stop until I reached the gas station 3 blocks away. I locked myself in the bathroom. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial 911. I remember the gas station light making my face look hollow. An attendant knocked. My voice was raw when I said I'd been with a boy who disappeared. The dispatcher asked calm questions that blurred. At the station, an officer folded the report and later showed me a missing person file. Travis Howell, filed 5 years earlier. Same grin, different name. Police arrived. I told them everything. The texts, the pictures, how he'd watched me while he spoke. They went to the house and found nothing. No father, no records, no trace anyone had lived there. The basement was empty, fresh primer still tacky on the drywall. I wasn't delusional. I had screenshots and messages. But one thing wouldn't leave me. The missing person report the officer showed me later. A boy named Travis Howell, filed 5 years earlier. Same grin, same eyes, different name. He'd vanished after a sleepover. Sometimes I wake up sweating, convinced I hear a shoe scraping on the porch and his grin in the darkness. They never found Aaron, not his real name, not where he went, not how many vanished before me. Sometimes when the house is quiet and the dark slides in, I still see that smile waiting. I used to believe heartbreak was something that only came from romance. Breakups, cheating, the kind of silence that comes when someone ghosts you. But I was wrong. At least for me, the worst heartbreak didn't come from a boyfriend. It came from a friend, someone I trusted more than anyone. Someone who had been in my life since I was 10 years old. Her name was Chloe Barnes. We met in 6th grade during recess. I was the quiet kid, tucked under the big maple tree at the edge of the field, reading a Goosebumps book I'd already read 3 times. Out of nowhere, Chloe plopped down next to me, ripped a blade of grass out of the dirt and grinned. "You look like someone who likes weird stuff." That's cool. Just like that, we were friends. No awkward build-up, no hesitation. From that day forward, it was like we were stitched together. By the time we were in high school, people didn't even say our names separately anymore. It was always Maya and Chloe, one word, one identity. She practically lived at my house. My mom called her her second daughter. We watched horror movies under blankets until 3 in the morning, planned imaginary road trips to New Orleans, whispered about boys and teachers and the tattoos we swore we'd get when we turned 18. She was my sister in every way but blood. At least that's what I thought. But things changed. They always do. It started in small, almost invisible ways. 10th grade rolled around and Chloe started hanging out with Jenna Marsh. Jenna was the kind of girl everyone knew. Popular, sharp-tongued, always the first to know where the parties were. She wasn't mean to me, not exactly. She just didn't really see me. And Chloe, she started choosing Jenna more and more. "I'll still see you after school," Chloe would say casually, brushing me off when I asked if she wanted to hit the diner like we always did after math class. "It's just for lunch. I'm trying to mix things up. That was the first crack. Then came the lies. Harmless at first, the kind you want to overlook. She'd tell me she was homesick. Then someone would post a picture of her laughing at Jenna's pool that same afternoon. Or she'd say her phone had died, but I'd watch her snap score tick upward. I didn't confront her. Instead, I made excuses because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You forgive. You tell yourself it's nothing. But then came New Year's Eve, junior year. That's when everything really broke. Chloe invited me to a party at Jenna's house. I didn't want to go. Crowds never sat well with me. But it felt like maybe my last chance to hold on to her, so I said yes. I wish I hadn't. Jenna's house was massive. Steel and glass, every surface gleaming like it belonged in a magazine. Her parents were off in Aspen, so the place reeked of cheap vodka and Axe body spray. The music made the floor tremble under my shoes. People pressed shoulder to shoulder, laughing, shouting, grinding to the bass. Couples disappeared into dark corners. And Chloe? She vanished almost the second we walked in. I spent the next 2 hours drifting between the kitchen and the living room, clutching a cup of flat soda like it was an anchor, forcing myself to look like I belonged when I felt like I was dissolving into the walls. Eventually, I found her. Upstairs. In a bedroom with Jenna, 2 football players, and a bottle of liquor that burned my nose just being near it. Chloe's eyes were glassy, her laugh too loud, too wild. I pulled her aside, my voice tight. Chloe, maybe you should slow down. She rolled her eyes so hard it almost looked painful. Stop acting like my mom. God, you're so boring sometimes. That was it. That was the moment. The hard little stone of something colder than sadness formed in my chest. Not grief. Not anger, disgust. We didn't talk for weeks after that. I didn't chase her and she didn't reach out. Until one random afternoon she texted like nothing had happened. No apology, no explanation. Just want a sleepover Saturday. My place. I should have said no. God, I should have. It was mid-February, one of those strange nights where the snow melts just enough to make the whole town feel soggy and gray. Chloe's parents were out of town, and she promised it would be just like old times, movies, snacks, ghost stories. I clung to that promise. I showed up around 7. The house was dark except for a glow of candlelight flickering from the living room. Chloe opened the door in a hoodie and fuzzy socks, smiling like nothing had ever broken between us. Like nothing had changed at all. We ordered pizza, curled up on the couch, and put on some dumb horror flick that we'd both seen a dozen times. For a little while, it almost felt like nothing had ever gone wrong between us. Comfortable, familiar, the way it used to be. I caught myself laughing with her, my guard slipping like muscle memory. Then Chloe leaned back against the cushions and said, "Let's tell scary stories." Like we used to. I laughed softly. You mean where we pretend it's just for fun but actually try to terrify each other so badly we don't sleep? Exactly. She grinned, eyes shining in the candlelight. She went first. Her story was simple. Something about a kid who got hit by a car and came back for revenge. The kind of thing you'd hear at a summer camp. I smiled, nodded in the right places, pretended I hadn't heard almost the exact same version before. Then it was my turn. It's about a girl, I said, holding her gaze across the flickering candle flames. Chloe raised an eyebrow, smirking. That's the setup? Let me finish. This girl, I continued slowly, thinks she has a best friend. She trusts her like family. But her friend isn't who she pretends to be. She wears masks, different ones depending on who she's around. Sometimes she's sweet. Sometimes she's wild. But deep down, she's rotten. She feeds on people's trust, spoiling everything she touches. The room went quiet. Even the candle flames seemed to lower like the air itself was holding its breath. Chloe blinked, then forced a laugh. Okay, a bit dramatic. I didn't smile. She betrays this girl over and over. Lies to her face. Talks behind her back. Leaves her out on purpose. But the worst thing she does? She invites her over one night, just like always. Pretending everything's fine. Pretending they're still friends. Chloe's smirk faltered. She crossed her arms. What's your point? The point is, I whispered, leaning in until my voice barely reached across the space. The girl already knows what's really going on, and she's tired of pretending. Chloe shifted uncomfortably, trying to laugh it off. You're weird. I just stared at her. Why'd you invite me here tonight, Chloe? Was it pity, guilt, or is this some game you and Jenna will laugh about later? She didn't answer. The silence stretched, so I pressed harder. You don't have to fake it anymore. I'm not your toy. I'm not your backup plan when the parties lose their shine. Her face tightened. Finally, she snapped, Jesus, Maya, it's just a sleepover. No, I said flatly. It's the last time I let you treat me like this. I stood up. She didn't try to stop me. I walked home in the damp cold without my jacket, my ears burning from the wind. I didn't cry, not then. But the worst part wasn't the walk or the silence between us, or even the feeling that I'd just lost the person I'd once called my sister. The worst part came 2 weeks later. Because 2 weeks later, Chloe died. She and Jenna had gone to some seniors party out in the woods. Big bonfire, loud music, no adults. They'd been drinking. At some point, Chloe wandered away from the group. They found her body the next morning in the creek, slipped, hit her head, drowned. Everyone said it was an accident. Maybe it was, but some part of me always wondered if something followed her from that night. From the story. From that lie of a friendship. People love to romanticize grief. They rewrite the person into an angel because they died too young. They say you have to forget the ugly parts, the mistakes, the betrayals. But Chloe wasn't perfect. She was broken, selfish, cruel sometimes, and I loved her anyway. That love, the betrayal of it, is what still haunts me. Not a ghost. Not a monster in the closet. Just memory, sour and rotting, like fruit left out too long. I used to believe some friendships couldn't break, that no matter how much life shifted, no matter how far people wandered, the ones who'd grown up alongside you would always stay tethered. But sometimes the fractures start so quietly you don't notice until they've hollowed everything out. By the time you finally see them, it's too late to fix a thing. This was late summer, 1987. I was 16, stuck in Marble Creek, a quiet suburb about an hour outside Stanton, the kind of city people drove into for jobs but came home from to breathe. Marble Creek wasn't exactly rural, not exactly urban either. It was a halfway place where the gas station still had those rubber cords that rang when your tires rolled over them. And you could lean your bike against the library wall without a lock, knowing it'd be there when you came back. My name's Evan. Back then I wasn't anyone special. Just another skinny kid with average grades, always tucked into comic books or hunched over arcade cabinets until my last quarter was gone. My world revolved around one person, Nick Ramirez. He was my best friend since second grade, when he slid half his Pop-Tart across the desk on a rainy recess and told me, "Don't let it get soggy." From that moment, we were a matched set. Same bikes, same Ninja Turtle lunchboxes, later the same faded knockoff Metallica shirts. If you spotted one of us, the other wasn't far. Summers blurred into campouts in each other's yards. Stupid ghost stories whispered through the dark, and hours of Double Dragon until our hands cramped. Nick had this laugh. Sharp, high-pitched, almost hyena-like. It was ridiculous, but it always broke me. Even when I didn't understand the punchline. For years, that laugh was constant. Then, the summer before junior year, things shifted. Nick started hanging with a new crowd. Guys who had cars, girls, and a streak of recklessness that made adults sigh. They weren't bad, just older, heavier, with something I didn't have. Ty, Brandon, and Keith, the sort of guys who always knew a guy. Nick met them through his cousin at the downtown skate shop. One week he was still sprawled on my floor, blasting through Contra. The next he was turning up in ripped jeans, reeking faintly of smoke. "Dude, you still play that?" he asked one afternoon, watching me fire up the NES. "Yeah," I shrugged. "It's fun." He rolled his eyes. "You gotta come with me sometime. We hang behind the tilt after closing. It's not kid stuff, I promise." I didn't answer. I didn't want to look lame, but something about the way he said it made my stomach knot. By August, our hangouts dwindled. Once a week, then once every 2. When I called, his little sister always picked up. "Nick's out," she'd say, with his new friends. I tried not to take it personal. God, I really did. Then one Thursday, the phone rang. Nick's voice, like no time had passed. "Hey, you want to come to this party Friday?" "Whose party?" "Keith's older brother's place. He's out of town, left the keys. It'll be chill, drinks, music." "Come on, Ev, don't be a ghost." I hesitated. I've never been to a real party. "That's the point. You're coming. I'll pick you up." Friday night, I stood in front of my mirror way too long, trying to land on something that said I didn't care, even though I cared way too much. I settled on my only button-down and a pair of Converse more duct tape than rubber. Mom raised an eyebrow as I headed for the door. "Where you going dressed like that?" "Just hanging with Nick," I muttered. She paused. "You two haven't hung out in weeks." "I know." Her face softened, but she frowned. Be careful, okay? Yeah, Mom, I will. Nick pulled up around 8 in his cousin's rusted-out Pontiac. Music thumped through blown speakers. He sat in the passenger seat, grinning, a half-empty Coke bottle balanced between his knees, the whiskey sharp even from the back seat. Brandon nodded at me from the wheel. This the dude? Yeah, Nick said quickly. Evan's cool. We drove past the edge of town into one of those new-build neighborhoods. Skeleton houses, no streetlights, only dirt roads and shadows. The party was alive before we even parked. People spilled across the lawn. A girl perched on the hood of a car, legs swinging, laughing into her red cup. Windows glowed orange with movement and sound. Let's go, Nick said, slapping my shoulder. Inside, the music was a physical thing, pounding through my ribs, rattling my teeth. Smoke clung to the ceiling in heavy gray ribbons. The air tasted stale, thick with beer and sweat. Bodies pressed together on the living room floor, people yelling over the music, cups flying as someone launched a ping-pong ball across the table. I tried to follow Nick, but within seconds he disappeared into the shifting crowd, swallowed up like he'd never been there. I lingered against the wall, clutching a plastic cup someone shoved into my hand. I didn't even know what it was, just that it burned all the way down, leaving my throat raw. A guy staggered into me, spilling half of it down my shirt. He didn't even look back, just kept moving. Eventually, Nick popped up beside me, grinning ear to ear. Having fun? He yelled over the bass. Not really, I admitted. He laughed too loud. You will. He dragged me over to meet some girl named Jasmine. She was pretty, with a nose ring and bright eyes, but she was clearly already drunk. She leaned in so close her breath tickled my cheek. Do you like dogs? She slurred. I nodded quickly, forcing a smile, trying not to look like I wanted to bolt. Before I could answer again, Nick was gone. By midnight, the place had thinned out. A lamp lay shattered in the corner, beer soaking into the carpet. Some guy was sprawled unconscious on the staircase with a Sharpie mustache drawn across his face. I finally spotted Nick in the kitchen with Keith and Ty, all three of them glassy-eyed and giggling. You ready? Nick asked, voice dragging, words barely clear. Yeah, I said cautiously. Can your cousin drive us? Ty smirked. Nah, Brandon's got it. He's fine. I glanced at Brandon. He was leaning against the fridge, holding an empty beer can upside down like he'd forgotten how it worked. I don't think, I started. Come on, Nick cut me off, rolling his eyes. It's fine. He drives like this all the time. Something twisted deep in my gut. I can walk, dude, Nick snapped, sharp and defensive. Don't be lame. I looked toward the door. It was miles back home, through dark roads I didn't know. My throat went dry. I climbed into the car. Brandon floored it before I could even close my seatbelt. Tires shrieked. The narrow roads blurred by, lined with dark pine trees and parked cars that seemed far too close. He swerved between lanes, taking turns without slowing, laughter spilling from the front seat like this was all a game. Slow down, man, I shouted. Nick just laughed, eyes glowing. He's good. It happened without warning. A parked sedan loomed at the end of the street. Brandon either didn't see it or didn't care. There was no slow-motion build, no cinematic pause, just a violent crunch of metal on metal and the brutal snap of my body lurching forward. My seatbelt yanked me back, the impact exploding through my chest. Nick wasn't belted. His body whipped forward, skull cracking against the dashboard, then the windshield. The sound, a solid final thud, lodged itself in my nightmares forever. I scrambled out, breath ragged, heart punching my ribs. Brandon was cursing, blood streaming from his nose. The passenger door hung open. Nick lay twisted on the pavement, one arm bent backward, elbow jutting in an impossible angle. Blood seeped into the asphalt around his head. His eyes fluttered, a groan escaping. Call 911, I screamed. Keith had bolted, vanished into the trees. Ty stood frozen, pale, useless. A woman rushed out from a nearby house, cordless phone in hand. An ambulance is on the way, she shouted. I dropped beside Nick, grabbing his cold hand. You're okay, man. You're okay. You're gonna be fine. The hospital was a blur of white lights and tears. Nick's parents arrived in chaos. His mother screaming at Brandon, his father folding into a chair, sobbing harder than I'd ever thought possible. The doctor said Nick would live, but his right arm was shattered, 4 breaks. Nerve damage so severe he'd never fully use it again. Nick was a drummer. Or he had been. After that, everything unraveled. I visited with comics, left voicemails, even waited outside his house. He never opened the door. At school, he turned away before our eyes could meet. No explanation. Just distance. Maybe he blamed me for not saying no, for not stopping him. Maybe I blamed myself too. Either way, what we'd had, the real kind of friendship, the kind forged in scraped knees and whispered secrets, was gone. I still see him sometimes. He works at a music shop in Stanton. Sleeves pulled down even in July heat. His right hand twitches when he reaches for a guitar pick. He doesn't look at me, doesn't say a word. Maybe to him I'm nobody now. Or maybe I'm just the guy who sat there and let his best friend climb into a car with a drunk driver, when I should have been the one to stop him. It started during freshman orientation, the kind of week that's supposed to be exciting but feels like an emotional minefield. Everyone pretends they're confident, but beneath the surface, we're all just scared out of our minds. You second-guess every word you say, every laugh you fake, wondering if anyone will actually notice you, or if you'll spend the next 4 years drifting alone. In August 2024, I arrived at Bellwood University, a mid-sized liberal arts school tucked into the heart of Evanston, Illinois. It was the perfect distance from Chicago, close enough to catch the train home for breaks, far enough to feel like an entirely new world. I was a digital media and film studies major, chasing a dream I'd been obsessed with since I was 12, endlessly watching behind-the-scenes YouTube clips of movie sets and special effects breakdowns. The first time I met Isaac Dorn, it was on orientation day. He had that unmistakable aura of someone who would be difficult. Every school has one. The kid who overshares, makes awkward jokes to nobody in particular, tries way too hard to be quirky. He showed up in a long trench coat despite the August heat, round glasses perched on his nose that he pushed up every 5 minutes like he was auditioning for an anime villain role. I shrugged it off at first. Probably nervous, I told myself. We were all new. But during one of the film studies mixers, he cornered me. Not figuratively, literally cornered me. I'd stepped away for water when he appeared, as though he had been waiting, plotting the encounter. "You look like someone who understands Stanley Kubrick," he said, his eyes locked on mine, unblinking. I forced a polite laugh. Yeah, I like The Shining." He didn't smile. His voice had a strange cadence, a mix of intellectual pretense and something sharper underneath, like he was performing calm while calculating. "I didn't say you liked him. I said you understand him," he corrected, and I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say next. "I'm Isaac," he added, finally extending a hand. "And you are?" "Sophia," I said, giving a half smile, glancing back at the small crowd of students chatting nearby. After that, he just attached himself. I hadn't invited him, and I didn't know how to politely make him disappear without feeling cruel. Over the next week, he started hovering around my group of friends. Nathan, Drew, Alicia, and me. We were all film majors, sarcastic, chill movie nerds who bonded over horror flicks and terrible B-movies. Isaac slowly infiltrated our dynamic. At first, we tolerated him. Most of what he contributed was just awkward. He'd derail conversations with rants about obscure Hollywood conspiracies or turn every topic back to himself. Still, he wasn't actively malicious, just socially off. Then it got uncomfortable. One evening during the second week, we were eating dinner in the student center. Just the four of us. The topic of Isaac came up. "I caught him outside my dorm last night," Alicia said quietly, almost embarrassed. "What?" I asked, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Like, waiting for you?" "He said he was just taking a walk," she murmured, "but this is the second time." Nathan's brow furrowed. "That's not cool." "I also saw him writing in a notebook during class," Drew added. "Like, about us. I saw my name. He hid it when I looked." We sat in uneasy silence, the kind that makes your stomach tighten. I tried to rationalize it. "Maybe he's just socially off," I suggested. "I mean, he's annoying, sure, but—" "No, Soph," Alicia interrupted gently. "He gives me a bad gut feeling. Like, really bad. I don't feel safe around him." We didn't know what to do next. None of us wanted to be the bad guy and confront him directly, so we started pulling away. Eating without him, ignoring his texts, drifting, and he noticed. One afternoon, while we were eating outside, he appeared uninvited, standing over us. His face twitched like he was trying to smile but failing. "Why are you all acting like children?" he snapped. Something inside me broke at that moment. I felt a surge of exhaustion. Not just from him, but from the constant politeness, the endless dance of avoiding conflict, of walking on eggshells. I was tired. So very tired. I stood up, my chest tight, hands trembling slightly. "You make everyone uncomfortable, Isaac. You barge in, interrupt people, talk over us, and you don't listen. No one hates you, but you don't know how to be part of a group without making it all about you. You creep people out, and we're tired of pretending it's fine." I expected him to scoff, curse, maybe storm off. I didn't expect him to lunge. He grabbed my neck, thumbs pressing into my throat with a crushing force. The world narrowed. The air ripped from my lungs, a sharp buzzing panic filling my ears. I felt his muttering against me, something low, venomous. "Stupid little fake." And I clawed at his arms, desperate. Time stretched, seconds folding over themselves until Nathan and Drew tackled him. Others rushed in, pinning him down. A faculty member screamed for security, the echo of panic bouncing off the walls. When it ended, I was shaking, chest heaving. Ice packs pressed to my neck, a bandage against the red marks, my voice gone for 2 days. We reported everything. The dean's office listened, serious, understanding. Isaac was removed immediately. Days later, I got the email. Isaac Dorn had been permanently expelled from Bellwood University. We thought it was over. Until Thanksgiving break. I was home in Elmwood Park, a quiet suburb outside Chicago. The night was cold, gray, almost silent. Around 10 p.m., I sat in my room scrolling on my phone when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock on my bedroom window. I froze. My parents' room was across the house. We lived in a one-story ranch. Nobody knocks on windows. My heart hammered. Slowly, I pulled the curtain aside. There he was, Isaac, in the same trench coat, standing in our backyard, eyes wide, smiling like nothing had happened. I yanked the curtain closed, my hands shaking, and ran to my parents. "Dad, Mom, someone's outside!" My words tumbled over themselves. My dad grabbed a baseball bat. My mom dialed 911. When we returned to my room, he was gone. No footprints. No signs of disturbance. The police took my statement, combed the yard, promised to patrol the area. Nothing. How had he found me? Upstate New York, he shouldn't have known. My address wasn't public. I hadn't posted anything online. I'd blocked him everywhere. I didn't sleep for 3 nights, then came the package. No return address. Just my name, a smiley face. Inside, a scratched DVD of Eyes Wide Shut with the words, "You understood him. You understand me." I broke down, phone trembling in my hands as my parents called the police again. A report was filed, a case opened. They couldn't prove it was him, but I knew. Over the following weeks, the signs kept coming. Flickering lights at night. A note in our mailbox, liar scrawled in red ink. A neighbor mentioning a strange man parked across the street, sitting there for hours, watching. Then just as suddenly, nothing. By winter, the harassment stopped. It's now 2025, I'm a senior. I'm okay. Therapy helps. I have friends I trust. Social media is private, my location hidden. I look over my shoulder more than most people, but I can function. Sometimes I wonder about Isaac. Where he is, if he's still planning, watching, or if he finally moved on. Every knock makes my heart jump, but I've trained myself not to look too long, not to expect to see him. I still think about how we let him in, not physically, but into our group, our space, and how close that almost destroyed me. If you're reading this, if someone gives you a bad gut feeling, don't ignore it, even if they seem harmless. Even if no one else believes you. Sometimes it's not the strangers you need to fear. Sometimes it's the one sitting beside you in class. Sometimes it's the friend you never actually invited. I was 8 the first time I met Caleb Mercer, and looking back, I can see now that should have been my first warning. It was one of those summer barbecues parents insist on, the kind at the Maple Pines neighborhood park where moms and dads huddle over folding tables, murmuring about mortgages and lawn care, while the kids are supposed to invent instant friendships amid the sand and wood chips by the swing set. My dad had just moved us in after Mom left, so I didn't know a soul. I remember sitting alone on one of those plastic jungle gyms, knees scraped and dirt-streaked, watching the other kids shriek as they chased each other through the grass, and that's when he appeared. "Your shoelaces are untied," he said. I glanced down. "They're not." He gave this slow, toothy grin. "Made you look." He was taller than most kids our age, pale with this strange, unshakable confidence. His black t-shirt had holes near the sleeves like it had belonged to someone else first. I didn't laugh, but he didn't leave either. "I'm Caleb," he said. "You look bored. Want to see something cool?" I hesitated, then followed him behind the old picnic shed, curiosity winning over caution. He pulled out a small wooden box, worn and scuffed. "These are my secrets," he whispered. Inside were a pair of rusted keys, a silver lighter, and a photo of a boy I didn't recognize. The kid in the photo looked tired, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept in days. "He used to live here," Caleb said, tapping the photo. "But not anymore." I never found out what happened to him. By middle school, Caleb and I were inseparable, or at least that's what I told people. He had this way of making you feel like the only person in the world who mattered, then flipping a switch so fast it left you questioning if he'd ever liked you at all. He wasn't the loudest or funniest kid, but people gravitated toward him anyway. He told stories, dark, vivid stories about families who devoured each other, towns that vanished overnight, kids who disappeared after sleepovers, never to return. He told them with this casual certainty like he'd seen it all. "What happened to the kid?" I asked once after a story about a boy who vanished after inviting his friend over for video games. "Oh," he shrugged. "He got what he deserved." Freshman year, things started to change. Caleb began making plans, quiet, dangerous-sounding plans. He'd murmur them in homeroom, scribble them in the corners of his notebook, making it seem like a game only I was clever enough to play. "You ever think about how easy it is to make someone disappear?" he asked one Friday while we waited for the bus. "Like really disappear them? Leave nothing behind but maybe their shoes?" I froze. "You need help," I said. He laughed like it was a joke. "You're just scared because you know I'm right." He had this way of saying things that sounded like jokes but weren't. By then, Ashwick, our quiet suburb outside Portland, had already seen 2 kids go missing in under a year. One had been in our grade. Posters clung to power poles. Candles flickered at monthly vigils in front of the community center. My dad waved it off as media hysteria, but there was a tension in town, an invisible weight like everyone was holding their breath for the next tragedy. One fall night in sophomore year, Caleb invited me over. His parents weren't around much. He lived with his mom, but I only saw her once in all the years we were friends. She supposedly worked overnight at the hospital. I remember stepping into his room and immediately feeling off. The window was wide open, even though the air outside was sharp with cold. The carpet smelled faintly of bleach, and every piece of furniture had been shoved back from the center of the room, like he was preparing for something. "You ever tell a story so good you start to believe it?" he asked, locking the door behind me. I laughed nervously. "Depends on the story." He sat cross-legged on his bed, the desk lamp casting weird, twisted shadows across the walls. "This one's my favorite," he said. "It's about a family that moves into a new neighborhood every few months. Polite, normal-seeming people. And in that moment, with the cold wind drifting through the open window and the shadows dancing, I realized Caleb's stories weren't just stories anymore. "They even let their kid go to school to make friends," Caleb said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "But it's all a setup." I swallowed hard. "A setup for what?" Caleb's grin stretched slow, unnerving. "They're hunters, not for animals, people. And the kid, he's like the bait. Picks someone, brings them over, and when the parents get home..." He made a soft, wet sound with his lips like something tearing in half. "They take their time." I forced a nervous laugh. "Jesus, that's dark. You want to know the best part?" He leaned in closer, his eyes glinting in the lamplight. "The kid gets to keep whatever's left behind. Their backpack, their watch, even their name if he wants. It's like inheritance." A creak echoed down the hallway. I froze. "You hear that?" "Old house," he shrugged almost casually. "They always make noises when they settle." But it didn't sound like the house settling. It sounded deliberate. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. "Seriously," I said, my voice catching. "Where's your mom?" "Out," he said without looking at me. Don't worry, she won't be back for a while. He reached under his bed and pulled out something, tossing it toward me. I caught it. It was a photo of me from behind walking home from school. My stomach dropped. What the hell is this? Caleb tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. Ever wonder why I picked you that day at the park? I dropped the photo. You're not making sense. He stood and walked toward the door. Maybe not now, but you will. Just remember, if you hear the front door open tonight, don't move. Don't say a word. They only go for the ones who panic. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling. Every nerve taut, waiting, imagining the front door swinging open. I must have drifted off sometime before dawn because when I opened my eyes, morning had come. The door was open. Caleb was gone. So was the photo. I left silently, heart pounding. After that, we stopped talking. I made excuses, claimed to be busy, and started sitting with other people at lunch. Caleb didn't seem to mind. He just watched me from across the cafeteria like a cat deciding whether it wanted to play with or kill the mouse now or later. The last time I saw him was the week before winter break, senior year. He showed up at my door without warning. Dad had already left for work. I opened the door and he was there, somehow older, hardened like he'd lived through something I couldn't imagine. "You still have your watch," he said. I looked down, confused. "What? You made it," he smiled. "I wasn't sure you would. Most don't. You were always smarter than them." I started to close the door, but he stopped it with his foot. "I wanted to thank you," he said softly, "for being part of the story." Then he handed me a package wrapped in brown paper. I didn't open it until he had gone. Inside was a photograph, the kid from the park all those years ago. But this time, he wasn't just sad. His face was missing, blank like a void. I never saw Caleb again. Last I heard, his house had been sold. No forwarding address. The new owners gutted the place, claiming something was wrong with the wiring, and said the crawl space under the floorboards had a persistent, strange smell they could never get rid of. Sometimes, late at night, I dream about that photo. The sound of footsteps outside a locked door. The cold wind through an open window. And sometimes, I get a letter. No return address. Just a single photograph inside. Different kids, different places, and on the back written in the same looping handwriting. He picked another. I still think about that year more than I probably should. I was 6, my second year at Hollow Pines High School, a small, forgettable place wedged between half-built strip malls and the kind of beige, lifeless suburbs you never see on postcards. It wasn't anything like the schools and TV shows. No polished lockers or crowded hallways full of cheerleaders and jocks. Ours was a tired, water-stained building where the fluorescent lights hummed too loud. The ceilings sagged in places, and the air smelled faintly of dry erase markers mixed with old cafeteria grease. Back then I was nobody. Not funny enough to be the class clown. Not ambitious enough to be an overachiever, not bold enough to be a rebel. I just existed. Average height, average face, average grades. My name's Evan Harper, but if you were in my class, odds are you wouldn't have remembered it. I used to have people, though, a group. Mark, Ryan, Jeremy, and Lexi. She sort of drifted between us like she belonged but didn't. We'd been tight in middle school, wasting afternoons on Halo marathons, sharing inside jokes no one else understood, and claiming the same lunch table like it was our little kingdom. Back then, it felt like the kind of thing that would last forever. But high school has a cruel way of wearing people down, sanding off the edges until they don't fit together anymore. By the middle of freshman year, the texts stopped coming. I'd scroll through Instagram and see them smiling at the pizza place after school, tagging each other in posts full of jokes I no longer understood. The worst part wasn't being excluded, it was the quietness of it. Nobody said a word. No fight, no goodbye. Just silence, like I'd been patched out of their lives the way you update a phone and lose an old app you never opened. Sophomore year, I stopped waiting for it to change. I ate lunch behind the gym most days, sometimes killing time in the library where I'd hold a book but never really read it. I'd watch the others walk by in groups, laughing, planning weekends. My math teacher once told the class, "High school's where you find your people." The words stuck with me, dug in deep. If that was true, then maybe I didn't have any people at all. Then came Connor. It was a Tuesday in early October, one of those mornings where the air still clung to the last warmth of summer. I was the first one in American history. The room was empty. Chairs pushed out at odd angles like the last class had scattered in a hurry. That's when he walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, with a military buzz cut that made him look older, harder, like he didn't quite belong in a high school classroom. His movements were deliberate, like someone who was used to watching corners, measuring exits. He spotted me sitting alone and gave me a small nod before sliding into the desk beside mine. "Connor," he said, voice low but confident. "Just moved here, Boston." "Evan," I replied. "You picked a hell of a town." He smirked like he already knew what I meant. That was the start. At first I didn't think much of it. Kids came and went all the time in towns like ours. Families always moving, chasing better jobs, cheaper rent, or just trying to get away. But Connor wasn't like the others. People noticed him. Teachers liked that he was smart but quiet. Girls liked that he carried himself with that kind of careless, brooding ease you usually only see in movies. And guys liked him because he didn't seem to care what anyone thought, which somehow made them want his approval even more. Me? I was just the first one who'd talked to him. We started eating lunch together. Not because I asked. Connor found me one day behind the gym, sitting on my usual bench. "This spot yours?" he asked, squinting against the sunlight. "Kind of," I said. "Cool." He sat down without waiting for permission. Better than pretending to care what people talk about in there. He jerked his head toward the cafeteria. We talked about dumb stuff at first. Bands we liked, horror movies we'd watched too young, teachers we couldn't stand. But Connor had a way of pulling you in. He told stories about Boston like it was another world. Real fights in alleyways, not the half-hearted shoving matches kids here called brawls. Sneaking onto trains, hanging with older kids, cutting school to sneak into concerts. Half the time I wasn't sure if I believed him, but the way he told it I wanted to. By Halloween we were inseparable. And that's when the shift started. Something subtle, strange. Suddenly people began noticing me, talking to me. After more than a year of being invisible, it was like the world had suddenly noticed me again. People waved in the hallway. Jason from chemistry asked if I wanted to come to a bonfire. Even Lexi, yes, that Lexi, stopped me and asked where I'd been hiding all this time. At first I thought maybe it was me. Maybe I'd changed, grown into myself, started giving off some kind of different energy, but I wasn't stupid. I knew the truth. It was Connor. He was like a center of gravity, and standing close to him made me visible. And God, it felt good. I started drifting toward other groups during lunch. Just now and then at first, then more often. I still saw Connor, but not every day. Sometimes just a nod across the hallway, nothing more. Then one Friday afternoon, he asked if I was going to a party. Some girl named Kendra was throwing it. Someone I barely knew, but yeah, I'd been invited. "Yeah," I said. "You?" He nodded, but his voice was tight, controlled when he answered. "Should be fun." The party was chaos. Kendra's living room was jammed with half the school, everyone shouting over a skipping playlist. I was in the kitchen, half listening to a group from biology, when I saw Connor. He was in the hallway, leaning against a doorframe, his eyes locked on me. He raised a hand, beckoning. When I got there, he said, "Want to step out back? Smoke?" I'd never smoked a day in my life, but I nodded anyway. "Sure." We slipped through the back door, crossed the porch, and kept going until the backyard gave way to the dark tangle of woods. The music thinned behind us into a dull thump. I waited for him to pull out a cigarette, maybe a lighter. Instead, he turned, facing me. "You changed," he said flatly. "What?" I laughed nervously. "You don't hang out anymore. You ditched me. Start a friend, right? Just until something better came along." "It's not like that," I said quickly, hands half raised like words could block the weight of his tone. "I've just been... You think I don't see it?" His voice cut sharp, accusing. "You used me." That's when I noticed the glint in his hand. A knife. "Connor," I breathed, stepping back, heart hammering. "Come on, man." "What is that?" He glanced down at the blade, almost startled, like he'd forgotten it was there. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, but his voice cracked. "I just wanted you to feel what I feel. Invisible. Disposable." He stepped forward. I ran. Branches whipped across my face. Thorns tore at my jeans, but I didn't care. My legs screamed, but fear carried me until I stumbled out of the trees and crashed onto the porch, gasping. "He's got a knife," I shouted, voice breaking. He pulled a knife. Heads turned. People stared. Connor emerged from the woods a moment later, calm as anything, smiling. "Dude," he said, voice smooth. "Are you okay?" You freaked out and bolted. And just like that, no one believed me. Not that night, not the next day. By Monday, it was as if I'd screamed about a ghost. Whispers followed me down the hall, side glances in class. Invitations dried up. Laughter trailed me. Paranoid, crazy, faker. Connor didn't deny a thing. He didn't have to. He just watched me unravel, smiling that same smile. I was back to eating lunch alone behind the gym. Sometimes I'd catch him walking past. He'd never speak, just smile. 2 years later, I graduated and moved far away. I never saw Connor again. No one really did. But sometimes I wonder if I wasn't the first. Maybe I was just the next. And late at night, when I hear a twig snap where it shouldn't or pass a stretch of woods that feels too quiet, I remember the look in his eyes. He wasn't sad. He was angry. And I don't think he pulled that knife just to scare me. I think he meant it. I was 23 when I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment just outside downtown Milwaukee. It wasn't anything fancy. Flickering hallway lights, water stains bleeding through the ceiling tiles, a heater that clanged and rattled whenever it kicked on. But it was affordable. I liked that I could walk to work. At the time, I was waiting tables at Bella Lucchi's, a mid-tier Italian place. We weren't 5-star, but business was steady and the tips kept me above water. It was my first real taste of living alone. My parents were 2 hours north in Oshkosh, and while we talked once or twice a week, I was learning firsthand what independence actually meant. Rent, groceries, stretching paychecks, dealing with silence. It wasn't glamorous, but I was managing. Not thriving exactly, but surviving. That's when I met Derek. He'd started at Bella Lucchi's as a dishwasher a couple months after me. Wiry frame, shaggy hair, sharp eyes that always seemed to be laughing at something only he knew. His smirk was constant, like he was always 2 steps ahead of everyone else's jokes. People gravitated toward him. I did too. I didn't have many friends in the city yet, and Derek's energy was magnetic. Chaotic, sure, but magnetic. He'd walk into a room and within minutes everyone would be laughing, even if the joke was at his expense. We fell into an easy friendship. After shifts, we'd grab beers at the Copper Tap, sometimes stumble back to my place where he'd crash on the couch. He'd bring his PS4, and we'd waste hours playing Call of Duty or watching trashy horror movies from the early 2000s. At the time, it felt like the kind of messy, fun bond people make in their 20s. Spontaneous. A little reckless but comforting. Looking back now, I see the cracks were there from the start. Derek drank. A lot. I didn't recognize it as a problem then. Or maybe I just didn't want to. He drank fast and often, and when he was drunk, he was unpredictable. Not violent, not at first, but reckless, loud. He'd argue with bartenders, wander off, disappear for hours without texting back. One night, he tried to climb onto Bella Lucchi's roof after close because he swore he'd left his keys up there. Vanessa, our manager, had warned him more than once. "Come in late one more time," she said, jabbing a manicured nail into his chest. "And you're done." Derek smirked, eyes half-lidded, and said, "Won't happen again, promise." It did, twice. The third time, Vanessa sent him home mid-shift. She didn't even bother hiding her anger. "You're done, Derek." He shrugged, pretending not to care, but I saw through it. That night he texted me, "Guess I'm free for drinks now, LOL." He didn't have savings. Barely had anything, really. After getting fired, he bounced between couches. A couple nights here, a weekend there. I tried to keep some distance, but guilt tugged at me. We'd been close, and he didn't have anyone else. His family was in Minnesota somewhere, but he rarely mentioned them. Then, one Friday night about 3 weeks later, he called. I was at home with my new roommate, Jordan, a quiet grad student I'd found through a rental site. Jordan was polite, kept to himself, always paid rent on time. While he sat at the kitchen table with a textbook spread open, I answered my phone. Derek's voice was thick, slurred. "Bro, I'm in a rough spot. I'm at the bus station. Travis kicked me out. Can I crash with you for a bit?" I lowered my voice, glancing at Jordan. Just for a couple nights? Yeah. I'm figuring stuff out. Just need a place to sleep, man. He showed up that night with nothing but a backpack, a blanket, and a half-empty bottle of whiskey. We cleared a corner of the living room, dragged out an old futon from storage, and made him a spot. The first few days were fine. He kept quiet during the day, disappeared most evenings. Nothing seemed out of place, not yet. He said he was job hunting, but I never once saw him bring home an application or even mention an interview. More often than not, he'd come back with a bag of greasy fast food and a case of cheap beer. Jordan noticed before I wanted to admit it. I don't want to be a jerk, he told me one night, lowering his voice like Derek might overhear from the living room. But he's not really looking for work, is he? I think he is, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I didn't believe them. Things went downhill fast. The drinking got worse. Derek started leaving empty cans on the floor, not flushing the toilet, leaving the front door unlocked when he left. One afternoon, I came home to find him passed out on the futon, music blasting from my Bluetooth speaker, the apartment door wide open to the hallway. Jordan was livid. This is not what I signed up for. I tried talking to Derek, asked him to help with chores, asked if he wanted me to help him look into a rehab program. He just laughed, brushing it off. I'm fine, man. Just a rough patch. You ever been jobless in a recession? It wasn't a recession. He just didn't want to work. The breaking point came at 1 a.m. I woke to shouting in the living room, heart pounding as I threw on a hoodie and rushed out. Jordan and Derek were nose to nose, both red-faced. Get out, Jordan shouted. You said 1 week. It's been over a month. I don't answer to you, man, Derek roared back, eyes bloodshot, his words thick with whiskey. You think this is your place? I stepped between them, chest tight. Enough, Derek, it's time to go. The way he looked at me, it was like I'd just stabbed him in the back. You too? After everything? You're just like the rest. His voice cracked, desperate and angry. Don't make this harder than it has to be. For a long, tense moment, he just stared, then shoved past me to grab his things. But as he bent to pick up his backpack, he suddenly swung a wild punch at Jordan. It barely connected, just skimmed his shoulder, but it was enough. Jordan grabbed his phone and called the cops while I held Derek back, his body thrashing, spit flying as he screamed insults and curses. By the time the officers arrived, Derek was slouched against the couch, breathing heavy, sweat beading on his forehead. I tried explaining, but he cut me off, his voice hoarse. He hit me first. One of the officers raised an eyebrow. So both of you were fighting? No, I said quickly. I didn't touch him. I was just trying to stop it. They didn't care. We're detaining both of you until we figure it out. Cold metal cuffed my wrists. I'd never been arrested before. The ride to the station was silent, the dim light inside the car throwing my reflection against the window. I felt humiliated, angry, powerless. 3 hours later, they released me. No charges, just a warning. Derek wasn't so lucky. Turns out he had a bench warrant in Minnesota for skipping a court date. He wasn't walking free anytime soon. I walked home in the pale dawn, my wrists still sore. Jordan was waiting at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee. He didn't say anything, just slid one across to me. That afternoon, I carried Derek's things to the curb, the futon, the blanket, even the PS4 controller he always brought over. That night it rained. From the window, I watched the futon fabric sag under the downpour until it collapsed into the pavement. We didn't hear from him again for months. His number went dead and no one at Bella Lukey's knew where he'd gone. Then, about 6 months later, I saw him again. I was on the 18 bus heading home after a double shift. Rain streaked the windows, fogging the glass. Half asleep with my headphones in, I barely noticed when the bus stopped at Highland and 4th. Someone climbed aboard and out of habit I looked up. It was Derek. He looked thin, hollow. His hoodie draped over him like wet laundry, and his sneakers were worn through at the toes. He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the floor, walked past without a flicker of recognition. Or maybe he saw me and just chose not to. I sat frozen, unable to move. He got off 2 stops later. Never looked back. That was it. I still think about him sometimes. Wonder if he's alive, if he ever managed to get clean, if he ever blames me for what happened. But mostly I think about how fragile people really are, how easily someone can unravel when no one steps in, and how people like me convince ourselves it's not our responsibility. Maybe it isn't, but it leaves a scar anyway. And on certain nights, when I walk home past dark alleys and shuttered bars, I catch myself wondering if Derek's still out there, wandering, waiting, or already gone. It all began the summer I turned 13. My name's Isla, and I grew up in a town called Brook Hill just outside of Milwaukee. It was the kind of place that looked picture perfect from the outside. Quiet streets lined with trimmed hedges, kids riding bikes until sunset, neighbors waving from their porches. People still left their doors unlocked during the day, as if nothing bad could ever really happen there. That summer, my mom signed me up for Camp Maple Ridge, a 2-week sleepaway camp deep in the Wisconsin woods. I wasn't exactly thrilled, but I wasn't dreading it either. The saving grace was that I'd be going with my best friend, Cassidy. That alone made the whole idea bearable. Cassidy and I had been inseparable since preschool. Our moms had been best friends in high school, and they'd always joked that their daughters would end up the same way. Turns out they got their wish. We just fit. She was louder than me, brasher even, but fiercely loyal. The kind of friend who would argue with a teacher on your behalf even if you were dead wrong. The first night at camp, we were placed in Cabin D. It was a roomy old wooden structure with 5 bunks, musty curtains, and a ceiling fan that spun lazily like it was about to give up. Besides me and Cassidy, we were sharing with 3 others, twin boys named Max and Logan and a girl named Eliza. Eliza barely spoke at first. She was pale, with skin that never seemed to catch the sun and thick black hair always tied back in a braid. She wore long sleeves even when the heat made the rest of us sweat through our shirts. I remember thinking she looked like she belonged in some Victorian ghost story. Strange, but not in a way that felt threatening. None of us were mean to her, but we didn't exactly pull her into the fold either. That changed by the 3rd or 4th night, once we realized the counselors weren't hovering over us. Cassidy, being Cassidy, decided to break the ice. She climbed onto Eliza's bunk one evening, grinning. "You're quiet," Cassidy said, tilting her head, "but I bet you're secretly funny as hell." Eliza's dark eyes flicked up. No smile, no laugh. She just said flatly, "Sometimes I think about what it'd be like if people could read minds. I think you'd all hate each other." It was such a weird response that we burst out laughing anyway. And that was Eliza's way. Strange, unsettling even, but somehow magnetic. You couldn't quite pin her down, but you wanted to try. By the end of those 2 weeks, the 5 of us had become a group. Me, Cassidy, Max, Logan, and Eliza. When camp ended, we stayed in touch. First with texts and Snapchat streaks, then with calls, group chats, and eventually weekend sleepovers. Eliza lived an hour away in a town called Fairpoint, but she came down often, usually staying at Cassidy's house since it was bigger, and Cassidy's parents weren't the type to ask too many questions. Looking back, that was probably mistake number 1. By the time we hit 15, the group's dynamics had shifted. Cassidy had a not-so-subtle crush on Max, and it was obvious he liked her back. Neither of them had the courage to say it out loud, though. Logan was just kind of there, funny, easygoing. Always good for a laugh, but never knee-deep in the drama. I'd started to feel little sparks for him. Nothing huge, just that camp crush kind of flutter. Eliza, meanwhile, had gotten closer to all of us. Too close to Max, if you asked Cassidy. She'd lean into him more than she needed to. Make odd remarks like, "If I were Cassidy, I'd never let you out of my sight." She always claimed the seat next to him like it belonged to her. At first, I thought Cassidy was just being possessive. Max was attractive in that soft, safe boy way, and jealousy was natural. But then things escalated. One night during a sleepover at Cassidy's, I woke up needing the bathroom. The house was dark and still, the kind of quiet that feels thick. On my way back to bed, I froze. Eliza was standing in the hallway outside the guest room where Max and Logan were sleeping. She wasn't moving, just staring at the door, her arms hanging at her sides like she'd been rooted there for hours. "Eliza?" I whispered. Her head turned slowly, almost reluctantly, like she was waking from a trance. "Just getting water," she murmured, and then drifted toward the kitchen. But I stood in the dark for a long time, listening. The fridge never opened. No water ran. Minutes passed, then an hour, and she never came back to her bed. I lay down, eyes wide open, pretending to sleep. That was the first time I felt something sharp and cold in my chest around her. Fear. The years rolled on. We all graduated from Brook Hill High together. Me, Cassidy, Max, and Logan. We ended up at UWM just half an hour away. Eliza applied but didn't get in. She went off to some small private college in Michigan instead. I wouldn't say we cut her off completely, but the distance made it easy to drift. The texts slowed, the snap streaks ended. We stopped inviting her places, and she stopped asking. Life was good. Cassidy and Max finally admitted how they felt about each other and got together. I ended up with Logan. After college, the four of us rented a 2-story house near the lakeshore. For a while, it felt like everything was exactly how it was supposed to be. Me, Cassidy, the twins, and sometimes Logan's cat, Pepper, who clearly believed the house belonged to her, settled into an odd, easy rhythm. 2 months before Cassidy and Max were supposed to get married, my phone buzzed with a Snapchat ping from an old group thread called Camp Chaos. For a second, I thought it was a mistake and almost deleted it, but curiosity won out. Eliza, hey guys, I'm back in town for a while. Would love to catch up. Cassidy shot me a private message right away. Cass? Oh, hell no. I admit I felt the same instinctive recoil, but then a smaller voice in me, the one that remembers lonely cabin nights and the way awkward people can sometimes become less awkward with time, whispered that maybe she just wanted to reconnect. People change, right? We set a time at a downtown cafe, deliberately casual. Cassidy made Max promise not to go, made him swear he'd stay away, but he and Logan were out buying suits and swung by to say hello anyway. Old habits die hard. When Eliza walked in, she moved in that awkward, sudden way she always did, standing up so fast her chair squealed and launching herself at Max like gravity had shifted. He froze. He didn't hug her back. I still remember the way his eyes flicked to Cassidy, guilty, confused, apologetic. Eliza laughed too loudly, a bubbling sound that didn't reach her eyes. God, I missed you, she said, voice too bright. Cassidy's face went cold in front of me. I think we're done here, she said quietly. Standing so suddenly her chair scraped. I should have listened to her. We all should have. We thought the incident ended there. Around 9 that night, Eliza texted the group again, softer this time. Cassidy hates me. I get it, but I have nowhere to go. My boyfriend kicked me out. Please, I'm not dangerous. My stomach tightened. A part of me wanted to send it straight to trash, but some stubborn streak of compassion, or guilt for not being kinder in the cafe, made me reply. I argued with myself and then the others. Maybe she really did need a place. Maybe one night wouldn't hurt. I convinced them, or they convinced me, to let her crash in the guest room. Just for one night. Cassidy didn't argue. She simply shook her head and walked away. Eliza arrived later with nothing but a battered backpack and a cheap perfume that clung to the air like mildew. She kept smiling the whole time, like she was acting for us instead of being a person. Thanks again, she said, all teeth. You're the only ones who ever really understood me. We woke up to a full breakfast spread the next morning. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, cut fruit, and none of us remembered getting up to make it. Eliza sat at the table like she belonged there, pouring syrup with an easy hand. My boyfriend wants me back, she announced between mouthfuls, so I'll be gone by lunch. Just wanted to say thanks. She shrugged, casual as if she'd popped by to borrow sugar. There was a smell, though, metallic and sour, like rusted pipes or old blood. It pooled around the guest room door and tugged at the back of my throat. I tried to act grateful when she left, but the knot in my chest tightened. Cassidy pulled me aside after the door shut. Something's wrong, she said. Her voice had that hard edge I'd heard when she was about to do something she knew she shouldn't, but would anyway. Max and Logan agreed. They both had that look where your stomach flips and you know a line's been crossed. We went to check the guest room. The closet door was closed. There was a thin red smear along the handle, not fresh, dry, and tacky, the kind of red that sets you alert. Cassidy opened it slow, like some of us still hoped for an explanation. A spilled pen, paint, some ridiculous accident. What was inside chased the air out of me. Photographs, dozens of them, tacked and taped and tumbled on the closet floor and pinned to the back of the door. They were of us. Camp snapshots with muddy knees, candid college pictures, nights out, even images I knew had been taken inside our house, photos we had never posted. My face and Cassidy's were sliced out. The paper gnawed at like someone had used a razor. A set of knives lay on the desk, each with dried brown stains ringing the blade. One knife had Cass engraved into its handle. Another had my name crudely carved into it. The walls were plastered with sticky notes, jagged handwriting repeating the same thing. He still wants me. They don't deserve him. I'll be the last one standing. We called the police the minute we closed the door. It felt weak and necessary all at once. 2 days later, the cops called back with news that felt both surreal and inevitable. Eliza had been arrested in a motel on the west side after an attempt to drug and assault a man she'd met through a dating app. They found zip ties, a rag with chemicals, and a notebook in her bag. Pages and pages documenting Max's routine. Where he went, what he wore, who he texted. The entries were clinical and obsessed, like someone cataloging a specimen. It wasn't the first time she'd tried something like this. Jenny, another girl from camp, messaged me after the reports broke and told me something I'll never forget. Eliza had once tried to crawl into bed with Jenny's older brother during camp. He was 17. The counselors quietly shuffled Eliza into our cabin then, hoping proximity would calm it. It didn't. And the break-in we'd chalked up to random vandalism weeks before she reached out, it wasn't random. Police later pulled footage of someone lingering near our back door at 3 a.m, staying just outside the motion sensor's blind spot. She'd never left. She'd been watching us, always close enough to breathe. Cassidy and Max postponed the wedding. That was the right call. Logan and I broke up not long after. Not because of any single act Eliza committed, but because everything changed. The house felt smaller and louder and more dangerous. The simplest gestures, a knock at the door, a voicemail, startled me. Therapy helped, slowly. I learned how to sleep with my back to the wall again and to tell my brain the closet is empty. But the thing that gnaws at me still isn't the knives, the logs, or even the attempts she made. It's that for years I let her inside my life. I trusted her. I made room for her. The real horror isn't only what she did, it's how comfortably she slipped into the spaces we didn't lock. How close she got before she showed us who she really was.